Ugh. Oh, I'm getting old. Oh, hey, hello there. Welcome back to another end of the month reading recap / book review. I read 4 amazing books this month. I didn't have a particular theme or TBR list created for this month. I picked these books out per my mood as I went through this month. I'm excited to talk about each of these books because I love them all, and with that, let's jump into it. The first book I read this month was Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. I was not emotionally prepared for this book. It was like I kept getting pierced by emotional arrows, like I was originally introduced to this book in April when I was doing my April TBR video where I asked friends and family to recommend me their favorite book. My friend Christine recommended me this book, but I chose not to read it because I saw it was around 600 pages and I wanted to get through the other book recommendations that my friends and family suggested. So I decided not to pick it up in April, but to put it on my Goodreads want to read list so I would remember to pick it up later. And lo and behold, Christine ended up gifting me this book, I think last month. She gifted me this book, so I needed to read it. I had no excuse. And I'm really glad that I was in the right mindset to read this book because this book is a lot. Just a lot. I knew this book would be a blend of historical fiction and science fiction, and historical fiction is not typically a genre that I will pick up on my own, but I love this. I was swept off my feet. I'm so glad Christine recommended this to me. I probably wouldn't have picked this up on my own accord, but I'm really glad that I learned of it and was recommended it by my friend. I honestly, when I read the back synopsis, I didn't really know what it would be about either. I was kind of confused, and so I'll try my best to explain the plot to you. So the story follows a mysterious book titled Cloud Cuckoo Land by Antonios Diogenes. The narrative jumps between multiple different characters across centuries, and they're all connected by their encounter with this specific book. Our first time period is, I believe, the 15th century. We have our first character, her name is Anna. She is a young orphan that stumbles across this book amidst the turmoil of the siege of Constantinople. And then we also see the perspective of Omer, who lives outside of Constantinople, but also encounters this book as he runs into Anna in the midst of this siege. Then our second timeline takes place in 2020 in Idaho, that we have 2 characters in this time period as well. First is Zeno. He is an elderly man who guides this group of kids in a play based off of Cloud Cuckoo Land. And then the second character is Seymour, who is a very troubled young activist who gets entangled in this shenanigans. Then in a not so distant future, on an interstellar spaceship is our last character, whose name is Constance. She finds solace in virtual reality, and also she encounters this story as her father retells this story to her on the spaceship. Although there were multiple perspectives and characters and time periods, I thought the author did a great job at not making it confusing. Trust me, I'm like one of those people who gets overwhelmed with a huge cast of characters, but I thought it was very well done in terms of spending enough time with the character and the time period to understand their story and understand where it left off when you come back to their story after jumping to the perspective and story of another character. I thought the structure was very impressive and I was fascinated by the creativity of it. I would say it did read a little slow in the beginning, and Christine did warn me about that the beginning to maybe the halfway point is a bit slow, but maybe it was because I was interested to see where it all went. There was kind of an air of mystery to it that it didn't read too slow for me, but I did lend this book to my mom and she's saying it's slow, so I just think I was in a different mindset, but I will let you guys know that it might read a little slow in the beginning and then towards the middle. After the halfway point, I do think you will find yourself glued to the couch, unable to stop reading the story. I would say the core themes that the book revolved around was about like hope and resilience, with the emphasis on the power of stories. Each character had their own set of challenges, but they were all dreamers and really found resilience with the fantastical story of Cloud Cuckoo Land. This book almost had me bawling my eyes out more than 6 times. I feel like it says a lot about how well the author can write if they're pulling at your emotional strings constantly throughout the book. It was like quite depressing for me personally, like the first half of the book. It was just emotionally devastating, but then the ending just wrapped everything so beautifully. I just loved how all the stories intertwined at the end, like they were all connected. It was really beautiful. It was really beautiful. I like don't have any other words to describe it. It was an amazing book. I'm really glad that I spent the time to read it. Yes, it was just beautiful. 10 out of 10 would recommend this book. If you have a like nice quiet weekend to just settle yourself down in and you're in the right mindset for like a historical fiction, science fiction type of novel that's 600 pages, then I would definitely recommend this book. The second book, well, I guess it's technically the first book, but anyway, the second book I read this month was A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is a novella and the sequel of A Psalm for the Wild-Built. So this is the second book of the series. I technically read this book first this month because I started it in the middle of reading Cloud Cuckoo Land. I was just so sad reading that book that I needed something like light and uplifting, that I picked up this book and finished it before finishing Cloud Cuckoo Land. LOL. So technically I read this book first. Since this is a second book of the series, I'll just give a small recap. So this story picks up where the first book left off, and just for a quick summary of this world, this book takes place in a society where AI and robots used to have a centralized role in this urbanized and industrialized human society. However, one day the robots gained sentience and they left human society to go wander and live in the wilderness. One day, our main protagonist, who is sibling Dex, he is a non-binary tea-serving monk, encounters a robot named Splendid Speckled Mosscap while wandering the wilderness, and Mosscap returned to socialize with human society to see how the humans are doing, and also seeks to answer the question, what do humans need? So the first book is basically an introduction of those two characters, and then the second book is kind of them traveling together through different neighborhoods and communities of Panga to answer that question. While the first book focuses on kind of the theme and message of contentness and enoughness, it kind of focused on the character Dex. The second book is more focused on answering that question that Mosscap hopes to answer, which is, what do humans need? Which is a really big question. And so I would say the second book focuses more on community and like the building of a community, but also just the same notes of just like kindness and friendship, insights about life and the complexity of life. Yeah, existential questions. Overall, this series, the first book and the second book, just have the same cozy vibes. They both give off the feeling of like a warm hug or like a cup of warm tea snuggled in a blanket on a cold day. The series is just very gentle and loving and kind and deeply confronting. Truly recommend this if you need something a little bit lighter. It is slow paced, so don't expect anything quick and fast like a thriller. It's very gentle. It's supposed to just make you feel a little positive on your outlook of life. So always love this book and really enjoyed the second book of our series. I did prefer the first one just a little bit more, but the second one was just as lovely. The third book I read this month was Service by Sarah Gilmartin. I just realized I'm like kind of matching with this blue. This was the advanced reader copy that I picked up when I was doing last month's book crawl, and I think it was an advanced reader copy at the time, but since then it's been published in early March, so it's fully out in bookstores now if you want to go pick it up at your local bookstore. So this story takes place in the restaurant scene of Dublin, Ireland, and it's centered around the sexual abuse allegations against a famed chef in the story named Daniel Costello. And the narrative is written from 3 different perspectives. It's written first from the perspective of Hannah, who is a waitress of this restaurant that the story takes place. And then it also is from the perspective of Daniel Costello, who is the head chef of this restaurant. And lastly, the perspective of Julie, who is Daniel's wife. I originally picked this up because the fact that it took place in a restaurant intrigued me. I've never read a book in such setting, and recently watching The Bear and Top Chef, I was curious to see what reading about a restaurant would be like. So that's one main reason why I picked up the book. And honestly, it ended up being way more serious than I anticipated. I knew it would be around sexual assault accusations, but I didn't know how deeply focused that would be until I read the book. Trigger warning for those topics: sexual assault, rape, misogyny. Trigger warning for those of you who might be wary of those topics. I took this book out to my friend Perrinen's pool to read, and I don't know if it made such a good poolside reading, honestly. Also, it was like ridiculously hot when I chose to read it outside, so that might also be a factor. But anyway, it was pretty slow to read in the beginning. It focused a lot on building up the scene and describing the restaurant, and there was a lot of characters. It kind of went through the kitchen staff, the waitresses, and it was a lot to take in. But overall, I really enjoyed the narration and the multiple perspectives that it was written in. I thought it was very well done in terms of making each of the voices of the characters very distinct. And because you don't know the truth behind the sexual allegations against Daniel Costello, there is sort of like mystery to the whole case, and you find your sympathies kind of shifting from character to character as you read from their perspectives. And that's just another thing that was really intriguing, and I really liked how the author played that emotion factor into the book. Overall, slightly horrifying in terms of the topic at hand. It inherently is just a difficult book to swallow, especially as you move further into the book, but it is very thought-provoking. Like, those issues are very prominent in our society, especially with the recent news of Diddy and the Me Too movement a few years ago. I do think it's very pertinent in terms of the topics that it covers. And, everything from discussing the guilt that sexual assault victims have, despite the fact they did nothing wrong, and then also the upheaval of family dynamics from such allegations. It was honestly very thought-provoking, and that's what I enjoyed about it. But yeah, I don't know. It was a lot. A very powerful and compelling novel if you're in the right mindset to read such a book and okay with the topics that it covers. And I would say this was a very intriguing book to read. The fourth book I read this month was Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop by Hwang Porum and translated by Shana Tan. I am Korean American, but my Korean is really bad, so excuse my pronunciation. I picked this book up completely on a whim last weekend. I went to the bookstore with the intention of buying a light romance novel, but I read, well, first of all, I saw the beautiful cover of this book and then read the description of it, and I picked this one up instead. It also made me want to go to more bookstores and buy more books, which is not a good thing as I bought so many books last month, but lovely book. Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop dives into the short stories of various characters, but it primarily focuses on the narrative of our protagonist, Youngju, who, despite achieving the societal markers of success like having a good education, getting a good job and career, and getting married, she feels very unfulfilled and burned out in her life. So she decides to leave it all and open her own bookshop. It goes through her initial challenges of opening a bookstore and her gradual journey of just building it up as a business and a community and more. The story takes place primarily at this bookstore, and it attracts a diverse cast of characters, from a lonely barista who starts working at the bookstore with Youngju, and to a writer and a mother and son. You get to learn snippets of each character that is introduced in the novel, who they are and the challenges they face in their life and their perspective of the world and their life. You get to fall in love with each character that the story introduces. And overall, it's just a very romantic book. It's like a love letter to book lovers, book clubs, authors, and bookstores. It's also very much a directionless book, a very plotless book. But as someone who needed something heartwarming and gentle, this was the perfect book for me. I wouldn't recommend this book if you're looking for something quick or binge-worthy. It's very slow paced. It's one of those books that requires just peace and space. I found it like the perfect bedtime reading book to wind down my day. It may also read overly optimistic and unrealistic to some, but what's wrong with the little extra positivity? You know, this world is already really depressing as it is. What's wrong with romanticizing a life where you can open a bookstore and make new friends and have a happy ending and hope? It exudes positivity, and that's exactly what I needed in my life, in this moment of my life. So anyway, I really love this book. It came to me, like I said, at the exact right moment where I needed it. It made me feel just a little happier, and it's a very just gentle, heartwarming, and uplifting book. Would recommend this book if you're looking for some positivity in your life. And with that concludes my June reading recap / book review. Hope you enjoyed my ramblings and shenanigans once again. Read these 4 amazing books. Maybe you can pick one of these up. I enjoyed all of them. They both had like a deeply emotional impact on me. And yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any of these on your TBR, or if you have any recommendations for me for the coming months. Thanks so much for joining once again, and see you on the next one. Bye.